Welcome to this week's episode of the Readout LOUD, a weekly biotech podcast from STAT. I'm Allison DeAngelis.
I'm Adam Forrestein.
And I'm Damian Garde.
It's Thursday, November 9th, and here's what we're going to talk about this week.
What exactly is a radiopharmaceutical? We explain a powerful new class of cancer treatments and their fascinating scientific backstory.
We'll also discuss the latest news in the life sciences, including Eli Lilly's new obesity treatment, yet another biotech blowup, and some news in the world of shareholder activism.
All that after a word from our sponsor.
With a focus on genetics and genomic research, Regeneron Genetics Center is revolutionizing the industry with new discoveries. Today, I'm joined by Tim Thornton, Senior Director of Statistical Genetics at RGC, to learn more about the future of genome sequencing and a white paper on the yield of genetic association signals from genomes, exomes, and imputation.
We really wanted to understand what are the implications for these different approaches? How does it impact your ability to discover new genetic signals?
Tim, where can listeners learn more about Regeneron Genetics Center?
The best place is regeneron.com.
So listeners of this podcast know that we love to talk about drug name pronunciations. We have a new one to talk about this week.
It's Adam's favorite topic.
Yes, it is. Zepbound. Damian, what is a Zepbound?
Well, a Zepbound. So the news this week that we got is that the medicine you may know as Mounjaro, which is an Eli Lilly treatment that targets, among other things, the GLP-1 hormone that has been dominating, I guess, the news in this sphere of the world for quite a long time. It had been approved as Mounjaro to treat type 2 diabetes for more than a year. It has now been approved to treat obesity, which was a long-awaited and expected, but we didn't know exactly when it would come, outcome, and that outcome came this week. And what you're getting at is that Lilly will not be selling it as Mounjaro, as a treatment for diabetes, but rather be selling it as Zepbound, a name that, leans toward tirzepatide, which is the generic name of this medicine, and also bound, which, I feel like the issue phonetically is that a P followed by a B feels very unnatural.
There's too many consonants.
Yeah. It doesn't flow. That P and the B.
And actually that we could talk about like how the drug works and stuff, but that did come up. There was a Eli Lilly hosted a press
we should talk about more important things than the name?
Yeah, we probably arguably should. Are there more important things? But Eli Lilly hosted a press conference on Wednesday in the hours after the approval, and someone, I can't remember who, but one brave, thoughtful reporter asked, "What's with the name?" And the company said, "We like it. It tested well with employers and with patients in the process by which the name comes out." Although I will say, listening to Eli Lilly CEO David Ricks say Zepbound, I feel like for 1 millisecond, he too kind of tripped over that PB. But maybe that was all in my mind.
They could probably call it stringy cat puke, and people would still be buying this drug. I don't think anybody's going to really care. They're going to call it Zep. It's going to be, I want that Zep drug. Yeah.
The kids are going to be like, hey, have you tried Zep recently?
Exactly. Yeah. It'll have a cute TikTok moniker.
And it's worth noting that Zepbound is, priced lower than Wegovy, Eli Lilly's weight loss medicine. They've set the price for Zepbound at $1,060 per month. Wegovy is $1,349. So with a discount like that, do you really care about the name?
Well, that's fair. And that, probably a more studious podcast would have led with this because it is probably more so the news. But so people may know, in clinical trials, tirzepatide, what is now Zepbound, has led to a greater percentage of weight loss than Wegovy did in its clinical trials in obesity. We're looking at like around 20% for Zepbound on the high end, whereas Wegovy was closer to 15%. So, there does seem to be an efficacy difference, and it's likely because this medicine targets more than one hormone involved in the metabolic system. So it's interesting that bucking industry tradition, where a new medicine, especially one that might have a claim of superiority, usually prices at a premium to whatever the other medicine is, because that's how pharmaceuticals work, Lilly made the decision to price it, at least the list price, at a 20% discount to Wegovy, which, as we know, is a medicine so popular that Novo Nordisk can't make enough of it to satisfy demand. So, there's a natural question of why did you do that? Both because that's not generally what pharmaceutical companies do, and because this business is counterintuitive in many ways. We know that pharmaceutical companies, especially for indications like diabetes, are incentivized to set high list prices, because that way the pharmacy benefits managers, who kind of run the world in American healthcare, can negotiate larger rebates and larger discounts, which benefit their businesses and ostensibly, maybe debatably, benefit their clients as well. Lilly chose not to do that. And so that came up in the press conference. And basically, Lilly's point was, we're looking at employers. Employers want a lower list price because that will incentivize them to opt into healthcare coverage for obesity treatments, which is sort of a convoluted thing, but the means by which obesity drugs are paid for in America is different than the means by which diabetes drugs are commonly paid for in America. So Lilly is kind of playing 3D chess here, doing the thing that, arguably investors raise an eyebrow at, which is charging less than they maximally could, with the bet that that will expand the overall market for this treatment in the months and honestly years to come as it rolls out.
So to say that, at this point, most health insurers aren't covering either Zepbound or Wegovy, and that they think that by offering a discount on Zepbound, they can get insurers and, employers to begin coverage of their medication first, offer a little bit of an incentive, if you will, right?
Exactly, yeah. And the numbers are kind of galling. Like, there's an estimated 120 million people in America who would fit the definition of overweight or obese by the FDA's definition, and thus would be eligible for Zepbound or Wegovy. Only about half of those people, about 50 million, have insurance coverage that would cover obesity treatments, and only about 5 million people in the country are actually getting one of these drugs right now. So I realize that's just a lot of numbers, but the point is the sort of like kinetic energy of this market is something that everybody is really keyed in on. How do you get that 5 million to be closer to that 50 million, let alone more than that? And that's where, the analyst estimates of the size of the market for GLP-1 like treatments just gets into kind of like funny money at a certain point. And it's because nobody really knows how to bridge that gap. And so I think what we're seeing is this is Lilly's best laid plan for doing that with Zepbound.
David, just on a related topic, this may be a question that you can't answer yet because it's too early, but has there been any response from kind of the PBM/insurance side of this story to the price? And noting that most large insurance companies own large PBMs, so they're not separate. They're not separate entities. They have different names often, but they are all owned. The giant corporate monolith.
No, it's a good question. I haven't seen a response. I think it's going to take time. These negotiations sort of, a starter pistol goes off, I guess, when FDA approval happens. And the drug will not actually be available in pharmacies until after Thanksgiving, according to Eli Lilly. So we're going to learn a lot about how that shakes out. Now, PBMs probably won't say, actually, we prefer a higher price, even though, we kind of know that functionally that's true. I think, Lilly's really putting the ball in their court, not to use a cliche. I think there is a headline benefit to Lilly to saying we priced at a 20% discount to our competitors. And the company also has published and is generating yet more data concluding basically that the societal cost of obesity far outstrips the actual, cost it would take to get more and more patients on this medicine. And so we're witnessing the early innings of what will be a very long and probably contentious fight between pharmaceutical manufacturers, including Novo Nordisk, and the payers, PBMs, and insurers that stand between people who might want these drugs and actually getting them.
I speculate that Eli Lilly is in some ways kind of also looking over its shoulder at the fact that its competitor, Novo Nordisk, is, about to release data at AHA this coming weekend and next week, showing additional benefit beyond weight loss. Their data is related to, the effects on the cardiovascular system, which is something that, as far as I'm aware, we haven't really seen data yet with tirzepatide, but for semaglutide, Novo Nordisk's drug, that's something that they've said is an added benefit and is also therefore an incentive to use their drug over others. Although I guess you could argue that there is a read through to both because of the similarity of the mechanisms.
Allison, those drug names just roll right off your tongue. You did such a great job.
I'm a professional.
Actually, as an aside, tirzepatide, a rare case where the generic name is easier to pronounce than the brand name, which again is Zepbound. But no, that is a good point. This weekend, the American Heart Association meeting is happening. Our colleague Elaine Chen will be covering it. May already be in Philadelphia as we speak. But that is where Novo Nordisk will present detailed data from their long-term cardiovascular outcome study for Wegovy. We know that the study succeeded, which is to say we know that treatment with Wegovy over about 5 years resulted in fewer cardiovascular events, heart attacks, strokes, fatalities than placebo. And we'll get those details this weekend. I think there is a class effect. I think the perception among physicians and scientists is that if Wegovy did that, it's reasonable to assume that a similarly powerful, or in tirzepatide's case, seemingly more powerful treatment would have a similar effect. Lilly is running a similar study of its own, but it is years behind Novo Nordisk, so we're not going to see those data for some time. What'll be interesting this weekend, as they present detailed data, is to look at the correlation or lack thereof between weight loss and this cardiovascular benefit, which is to say, there's still some debate over whether GLP-1's effects in the long term on your heart health are solely or mostly the result of the fact that these drugs make you lose a lot of weight, or if there's something else. As we've learned constantly, GLP-1 or targeting GLP-1 has loads of effects, including psychologically, in the vascular system, et cetera. There could be other explanations for this. And so that'll be interesting because, as we mentioned, we know tirzepatide leads to greater weight loss than semaglutide. But if weight loss itself is not the driving factor of the cardiovascular benefit that Novo saw, then that might kind of change the conversation coming out of the conference.
So, Damien, so this conference, the AHA conference is this weekend, and all of this comes obviously in kind of, we look at it sort of from a competitive standpoint. You've got Lilly and Novo sort of way out ahead of their other pharma competitors. As we recorded this podcast this morning, actually AstraZeneca licensed an early stage oral GLP-1 from a Chinese drug maker. Again, early stage. But I wanted to ask you about Pfizer, because Pfizer has an oral GLP-1 drug candidate that they are studying. I think results from a mid-stage study, are coming out relatively soon, and that probably is a pretty important milestone for Pfizer, right?
That's true. Yeah. Any day now, we expect to get, as you said, mid-stage data on an oral medicine like this, or a potentially competing medicine that Pfizer is developing. They had discontinued a second one that they were also working on. And it's interesting because, the obvious thing, the medicines we've talked about to date are injectables. They subcutaneously injected once a week. An oral treatment would be more convenient. I think there's no doubt about that. And we know the demand for these drugs is insatiable, apparently. So you can see the market opportunity for Pfizer. What I think is curious is how much attention is being paid to this data readout when you remember that Pfizer is a massive multinational company, but the recent story of the firm, which is dealing with what turns out to be a pretty dramatic decline in demand for the COVID-19 products that it made so much money off of in recent years, has made people talk about Pfizer almost like it's some plucky biotech company where like every new data readout can swing market value to such an extent, which I don't know. That's sort of like a meta-phenomenal thing. But to your point, yes, we expect, it is expected that sometime before the end of the year, Pfizer will have those data. And again, they're mid-stage data. They're testing multiple doses. I think what people want to see is, can this medicine get into the ballpark of the approved GLP-1 treatments in terms of weight loss? And can it do so without any safety concerns that would make it either impractical or perhaps not as competitive on the market compared to these injectable medicines? And that remains to be seen.
So, speaking of the world of biotech, we had another biotech blow up this week with Ventyx. Adam, tell us what happened.
Yes, Allison. Ventyx Biosciences, a San Diego-based biotech company. Yes, it blew up. I guess that's a polite way of saying that their stock went down like 80, 90%. And the reason for that blow up was the failure of a mid-stage clinical trial of an experimental drug that targets TYK2. It's a pretty well-known drug target. Bristol Myers has an approved TYK2 drug for plaque psoriasis. So this Ventyx drug did not work. And probably we're talking about this not necessarily just because of Ventyx, which is a company that probably people may not know about very much. But I think it's more indicative of kind of a malaise or a problem in the greater biotech world when we have these companies that sort of develop that are founded around kind of Me Too targets, Me Too drugs. Crowded fields of clinical development, and they go public. And I think when we sort of look at these companies after the fact, and there's a little bit of sort of Monday morning quarterbacking that goes on here, but you sort of wonder, like, why did these companies exist in the first place? Is maybe the kind of the existential question that we ask. Were they really going to be able to compete in a very crowded field against larger competitors necessarily? And I think Jared Holtz, the biotech strategist, commentator at Mizuho Securities, kind of put out sort of a mini rant to this effect in the hours after Ventyx blew up, and I thought it was pretty good, because I think it sort of, it just sort of described this phenomenon that I think that we all sort of look at, like there's just too many of these biotech companies out there, and then they blow up, and you wonder sort of like, why did they get funding in the first place? And I think it's a relevant question to ask.
It's also maybe kind of a warning looking forward. In the Ventyx situation reminded me that there's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing in biotech, especially when things don't work, which is to say that as valuations have gone down and as this sort of investment climate has become more conservative, we've seen venture capitalists and people who buy into IPOs favoring companies that have medicines for known targets that have a conceivable benefit over the competition and have a pathway to the clinic and thus the market over the yesteryear flavor of platform companies with these like bold science projects that are going to revolutionize this, that, or the third. The Ventyx thing, they were that former type of company with the medicine targeting TYK2, which, as you mentioned, is competitive. Bristol Myers Squibb has an approved medicine there. Takeda paid a lot of money for a medicine that looks like it works pretty well in inflammatory disease. And so it fit the phenotype of a good biotech investment just about 12 months ago. And it went public at a roughly $1 billion valuation. Now, drug didn't really work the way it was supposed to. Companies trading below cash, everything has gone wrong. But it's just a reminder that, like, even the best laid plans, even conservatism in biotech investment can still lose you a ton of money if the drugs don't work, which I realize now is just kind of a truism, and this wasn't a very interesting point. But it's very sign of the times, I guess, is what I agree with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what now does Ventyx have to fall back on? I think that's the inherent risk when you kind of pivot from the platform play that has been so in favor over the last, 4 or 5 years to focusing on companies with a clinical stage asset, is that what happens if that asset fails, which is incredibly likely in the biotech world. The vast majority of, experimental drugs will not make it through clinical trials. So then what does a Ventyx fall back on? Adam, do we have an answer on that?
Well, I think the counter argument to all of this, or, maybe the argument that would be made by people who found companies like Ventyx, is that, look, you never know until you do the experiment. And maybe you got the best TYK2 drug, or maybe you got the best fill-in-the-blank target drug out there, right? So I understand that argument, and and obviously there's some logic to it. It just seems like oftentimes we see these things don't work. I don't know, maybe like a Nimbus Therapeutics, and Damien, you mentioned the Takeda drug, right? I mean, they look like they had a drug. It's certainly not. I guess you can call it a Me Too because it's sort of behind, but maybe it's the best one. And now Takeda has it, and they did a big deal for billions of dollars. So maybe that justifies this kind of strategy. Just talking about the other side.
Well, finally, last week we mounted a podcast farewell to Jean-Jacques Bienaimé, the longtime CEO of BioMarin Pharmaceutical, who's retiring next month after 18 years at the company. This week we learned, well, something that kind of colors that story, which is that Elliott Management, the formidable and respected and probably feared investment fund that does a lot of shareholder activism, has apparently taken a pretty sizable stake in BioMarin and has been in dialogue with the company, this is according to Reuters reporting, in recent months about its ideas for how BioMarin might operate going forward. Now, traditionally, activists have a pretty clear idea how companies should operate, and it is to spend less money and make themselves more attractive to a potential acquirer. I'm not sure if that's what Elliott's talking about. They haven't gotten to the point of, filing things with the SEC or mounting a proxy challenge, anything like that. So no idea what those conversations were, but it does kind of color the possibility that JJ's retirement was related to this matter. Again, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Elliott's pretty effective when they come in. I think they're influential and they do this. They're sort of low key. I mean, they're not like an Alex Denner type of an activist investor who tends to sort of make a lot of noise. Elliott, it seems to be, they sort of play a little bit behind the scenes. So like you said, we don't really know what their strategy here is and whether it is about putting the company up for sale or just maybe doing other things like, cutting costs. I mean, obviously one of the criticisms of BioMarin for a long time has been that, while they were a very successful developer of drugs for rare diseases, they spent a lot of money and took a long time to reach profitability. And so maybe that's something, now that they've sort of reached this tipping point, to use another cliche, today's cliche day on the podcast, maybe Elliott wants them to boost profitability.
It's interesting, yeah, and it makes for an interesting first day for Alexander Hardy, the CEO who is stepping in to replace JJ in December, in that the climate around the company, at least in terms of public perception, now that we know about the Elliott interest, is different than it seemed just last week when we got the news of this happening. So very much something to watch.
For decades, oncologists have known that blasts of radiation can be powerful tools for treating cancer. The problem is that the imprecise treatment will destroy not only tumors, but the healthy tissues around them.
After years of research and a few $1 billion of investment, we're now entering the age of radiopharmaceuticals, a class of medicines that pair radioactive isotopes with cancer-hunting molecules that offer a targeted way to radiate tumors while sparing surrounding cells.
So, Allison, you wrote a great story this week on the rise of this new technology. I'm going to call them Zappy Zaps in the spirit of Zep. So we've got Zep, we've got Zappy Zaps.
Everyone behind the scenes should know that Adam, for the last 24 hours, has been referring to this week as the week of Zappy Zaps and Zep. So that's the subtitle.
This is the Zappy Zap segment of the podcast. So, Allison, tell us, kind of big picture, tell us what we're talking about when we refer to radiopharmaceuticals.
So radiopharmaceuticals are a class of cancer medicines that have been around for a couple of decades. So we saw a slate of approvals, in the late 90s and early 2000s of a few medicines that used radioactive isotopes and basically bound them together, linked them together with a molecule that would seek out a specific target that sits on the surface of cancer cells in order to deliver that radiation specifically to those cancer cells, as opposed to right now, oftentimes if you are a cancer patient and you go in to receive radiation, you're getting a kind of beam of radiation from outside of your body that has to go through layers of, skin and muscle and bones and can cause irritation and is rather imprecise. This is a very targeted approach, and that's part of what got people excited about it. But the kind of hitch with that first generation of products was that for a variety of reasons, drugs like Bexar and Xofigo disappointed commercially. They kind of entered spaces where they then were met with a bunch of competition. And in many of those cases, the companies behind them actually discontinued production of those drugs. The field kind of quieted down, and, kind of zoom forward to 2017, 2018, Novartis acquires two startups that are developing radiopharmaceuticals, spends about $6 billion in total, and within a couple of years is putting out new types of these therapies, the second of which, Pluvicto, sends a jolt through the industry and shows this really exciting benefit in patients with prostate cancer. And that kind of, gets people excited about this field once again.
So that's interesting. As you mentioned, that kind of galvanized this renewed interest from pharmaceutical companies, obviously, but also startups and venture capitalists. So what does that look like right now? Like, what's the state of radiopharmaceutical development in terms of the pipeline of treatments and the amount of investment in the space?
Yeah, to kind of peel back the curtain, I started noticing within the last year or two financing announcements in the radiopharmaceutical space, which I had no background on, and financings that were really healthy and quite large for kind of the depressed biotech market that we're in right now. There are now 75, roughly, give or take, startups and biotechs in this field, and several of which who have launched in the last couple of years with, like $90 million rounds, $120 million Series Bs. There's actually quite a bit of money going into this field. And then we've also started seeing acquisitions. We had Eli Lilly last month jump in and acquire Point Biopharma, which is a player in this field. And one of the rare biotech IPOs this year is another radiopharmaceutical company called Raise Bio, which actually, managed to pull off an IPO and has not really seen its stock drop like others have this year, at least not yet. So there is a renewed vigor that I'm hearing from the investor space, basically where they're saying this drug we think can do what things like ADCs and, couldn't do. And, we have been wondering what we do next in the oncology space when, CAR Ts have kind of run into their own hiccups and, development in some of those ways has hit a bit of a barrier, and commercialization has run into so many problems. If we can get this right, we think that radiopharmaceuticals could be really widespread and beneficial for patients.
So, Allison, these are not the medicines that we're sort of used to. They're pretty complex to manufacture and deliver. Has that been an issue?
Absolutely. That's something that we've seen Novartis run into, and has kind of, caused many speed bumps for the launch of Pluvicto. So radiopharmaceuticals, one, involve a radioactive isotope. And that's not something that is easily sourced. The companies that are working in this field today often a lot of them are using either what's called a beta emitter called lutetium, or using an alpha emitter called actinium. Now, here's where we get geopolitical. One of the largest suppliers for nuclear products is Russia, and Russia is one of the largest suppliers for actinium, and a component that's key in producing lutetium. So that creates a little bit of an international hurdle in that the United States and many other nations are, responding to the invasion of Ukraine, are putting sanctions on Russian exports. So far, nuclear products and Russia's nuclear industry have not been included in those sanctions, but there's kind of a question of, if that will be the case in the future. And some people have called for that. So one, sourcing the raw materials, not exactly a walk in the park. Then you run into this hurdle that these radioactive isotopes are not, shelf stable forever. They're something that begin to degrade and often degrade within a matter of days. So you need to be manufacturing these things and then shipping them out to patients, usually within a matter of days. Novartis right now manufactures and ships out Pluvicto, their big blockbuster radiopharmaceutical drug for prostate cancer, in about 3 days, they told me. So that's a very technical and intricate supply chain that we're working with. And that's an open question as to how that evolves and whether the industry is able to get that supply chain right. And that has led to companies launching, as we saw last month with this company called Nucleus, Nucleus Radiopharma, who are basically focused on, we will help you guys do this. It's a contract research and manufacturing organization that is designed specifically to help people with radiopharmaceuticals. And they have backing from like the Mayo Clinic and GE Healthcare and Fox Chase Cancer Center. So, big manufacturing and production hurdles, await this field.
So outside of manufacturing, clinically, as it stands, approved radiopharmaceuticals are indicated for patients whose cancer has endured more common treatments. I know you spoke to people who think that these medicines have a lot of promise in earlier lines of therapy. So what might the future hold for them, and what should we be looking out for?
I think that the future looked a little bit different before and after ESMO. The oncology meeting in Europe just a couple of weeks ago, where Novartis presented kind of first of its kind data for Pluvicto in patients who had not yet received chemotherapy. Pluvicto right now is approved for patients who have, as you mentioned, Damien, gone through other more common cancer treatments, more standard of care treatments. Novartis hopes to move Pluvicto kind of earlier in the pipeline. And in this data that they presented at ESMO, it actually, patients taking Pluvicto before chemotherapy had a 50% lower risk of progression than patients who received the standard of care, which many people saw and when they spoke to me pointed to as a sign that this class of medicines can be hugely influential for patients. With other oncology medicines that have been in development and, therapeutic modalities that have been in the works in the last couple of decades, there's always been this question of how the tumor will respond to it. Will the tumor begin to develop a resistance to the treatment? That's very common with, immunotherapies. That's not necessarily the case with radiopharmaceuticals, where when you drop that radioactive iodine, or the radioactive isotope, I should say, on the tumor, you're creating either single-stranded or double-stranded DNA breaks that really don't give the tumor a lot to work with in terms of kind of rallying itself and developing a resistance. So there's a hope among some that, this could be used in patients, before chemotherapy, and kind of potentially could have, we don't use this word lightly, a curative effect in patients. Now, not everyone in the radiopharmaceutical space is ready to kind of put that out there, but there are some who are starting to broach this concept that maybe we can really just zap cancer and cure patients who might otherwise go through many, many years of cancer treatment or succumb to cancer.
So Damien, Allison, I've been covering biotech for a very long time. So come gather around my rocking chair and let me tell you a story about the old days of radiopharmaceuticals. So the first radioimmunotherapy approved was called Zevalin. It was from IDEC Pharmaceuticals. That's now part of Biogen. But the really interesting trivia here is that that drug was reviewed by the FDA in 2001. The FDA advisory panel meeting for Zevalin was held on September 11th, 2001.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah. So as the planes were hitting the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, this FDA advisory panel meeting was actually underway. And people were getting alerts and their phones were buzzing. And I've talked to people who were there, actually, because I was covering this at the time. And there was just like stunned shock, silence. Obviously, people really didn't know what was going on at the time. But after sort of a pause, they decided to just keep going and keep going with the advisory panel meeting, and they did because they didn't really know what else to do, and it got a positive vote. But when you talk to old folks who used to work at IDEC, and there were employees at IDEC in their San Diego headquarters who were sort of watching this panel, and obviously they were also watching the television to sort of seeing the unfolding events of September 11th. So it was but that's a little radiopharmaceutical trivia for you.
Wow, I do not know how to follow.
I have no idea how to respond to that.
I there's no response. It's just a fascinating little twist in the history of this field. So I felt like I should share that with you.
So strange. I can't imagine going on with an FDA advisory panel meeting. In
they did.
Context.
They just kept going. They they were there and they didn't really know what to do. And you got to remember, back then there was that morning there was so much confusion. Right? I mean, people really didn't know what was going on, and so they did. But so obviously it was a very bittersweet day, a tragic day, but one that should have been really joyous for the employees of IDEC and Zeppelin, but it obviously turned out not to be.
I literally don't know what to say next.
What a jarring shift in tone.
And on that note. That does it for another episode of the Readout Loud.
Thank you to Teresa Gaffney for producing this week's episode.
Our senior producers are Hyacinth Empanato and Alyssa Ambrose. Our executive producer is Rick Burke, and our theme music is by Brian Joel.
We'd love to hear from you. Tell us what you like about this week's episode, what you didn't like, and whether you want me to tell more old stories from oldie time biotech. I can do it if you won't. You can do all that by sending us an email at readoutloud@statnews.com.
And if you like what we do, leave a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever platform you use to get your podcasts.
See you next week.